to roll call. I'd just like to say it's an honor and privilege for me to serve as your chairman. And I think that Lisa did a great job, and I applaud her for that. I'd say to our students that not only the Regents, but any students we have, you need to shoot for the moon. This is your opportunity to go out and do what you want to do. We have the resources. If you have difficulty, I would tell you to go to your community colleges, and they are there to help you. To our faculty and staff, thank you for your endurance of COVID, virtual learning, tornadoes, and floods. We really appreciate you, and I want you to continue to strive to help all of our students. To our 16 college presidents, thank you and continue the hard work. To Dr. Zarapata and his cabinet, this has been a difficult 2 years. We've asked a lot from you and your staff, and you have performed with outstanding results. To my fellow Regents, we have made great progress, and I would remind you that we are a governing body, and our only employee is Dr. Zarapata. So we need to be sure that we give him the tools and equipment to make sure that he carries out the mission of KCTCS. Every region is important. I hope that every region will have the opportunity to serve on various committees, and your voice is important. And I pledge to you that I will listen to you. Going forward, I would encourage you to speak up, become a part of KCTCS. I promise to listen to your concerns and treat all of you with respect that you deserve. All right, with that, Ms. Duncan.
Going to take roll. Chair Stevens.
Present.
Vice Chair Martin.
Here.
Secretary Fletcher.
Present.
Regent Bogard.
Present.
Regent Cox.
Here.
Regent Finan.
Here.
Regent Girdler.
Here.
Regent Green.
Here.
Regent Hamilton.
Present.
Regent Herdink.
Here.
Regent Jackson.
Present.
Regent Rabinowitz.
Here.
Regent Smith.
Present.
And Regent Witten.
Present.
All regents are present. We have a quorum.
The next item on the agenda is learner success. Dr. Zarapata.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm going to ask Dr. Williams to come up here and talk a little bit about the updated learner success report and then an academics and workforce presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much and good afternoon. It's a pleasure to bring you up to date on some of the items that are happening in the learner success area. First, if you could pull up the PowerPoint, please, Hannah. Just want to let you all know that each quarter the Board of Regents is informed about credentials that have been approved by the KCTCS president. This last year, several semesters ago, this board approved policy 4.11 that changed the policy to give Dr. Zarapata the authority to approve certificates, diplomas, and degrees. And that's going to be my first report. The second will be on certificate and program suspensions, a quick overview on enrollment, and then just a couple highlights from the office. If you'll please move on, Hannah. Or do I have control of the slides? Okay. Thank you. That's all right. You get to be the control. For those that may not be aware of how our credentials work, I want to explain that we use what we call stackable credentials. So a student can come and get a short-term certificate. That might be something like a nurse aide class, 3-credit-hour class that then leads to a state certification and work in a long-term care facility. Then they can come back and use that and stack more credits on top of that and become a licensed practical nurse, for example, and then perhaps add to that to become a registered nurse. So each small certificate builds. In diesel technology, there are a whole lot of individual small certificates because each one leads to a particular diesel certification that is valuable to the student and to the employer as they move out. So as you look at this, you can see that in the short term, it's short-term specific grouping of skills. When it moves to the diploma, that's a bundle of those skills, but doesn't really include the effectiveness courses that we would call general education courses. And then the associate degree for us is the terminal degree. We offer the associate in arts and associate in science, which tend to be direct transfer degrees to university, and also the associate in applied science. So if you'll move on, please. So this past term, since the June board meeting, Ashland was approved for 2 new programs. These are programs already in the catalog. If we have a brand new program, like recently the board approved a prosthetics program at Bluegrass, that program does come before the board for full authorization. But if it already exists in our catalog, then Dr. Zarapata has the authority to approve at the local level. All of these programs go to the Council on Post-Secondary Education for full approval, and then the colleges are able to add them to their inventory. So this term, we had 2 programs from Ashland, one in radiography and one in medical assisting. Both were started at the request of their local healthcare partner. We didn't have any new diplomas, but we did have 5 colleges that added 16 new certificates already embedded in existing programs. And you have a list of those certificates in your board materials. So any questions on the new programs? Seeing none, let me talk about suspensions. You don't want to just add programs because there's a need. You also want to close programs. And when you close a program, you do what we call suspend it. We may have students in that program, and you want to give them the opportunity to be taught out of that program, to finish that program and complete. Each catalog year, we're essentially making a promise to our students that that program will be there for them to complete within a reasonable time period. And so those courses or those programs are suspended for a 5-year period, but they can be reinstated if the college then sees a new need. So you have a list of many courses in your materials. We had 8 colleges. And if you go ahead and move one more slide. Oh, I threw this in here because you've seen it before, but we also suspend what we call tracks. So within our Associate of Applied Science degrees, we may have specialization tracks. Like in the business program, there's a marketing track and an accounting track. And so we may also close a track of a program. And now if you could go again. So this time we suspended 4 Associate of Applied Science degrees that included 6 diplomas, 30 certificates, and 19 program tracks. I'm really proud of our colleges that they really keep an eye on what is needed in the community, and they try to be very responsive. If you have a program that's had very low enrollment or the students are not finding jobs in that region, then it's time to close that program or suspend it and teach it out. So Hazard in particular really went through their inventory and cleared out a lot of programs and certificates that had just not really been utilized. It doesn't mean they might not have value at another college in another region, but it does mean that it no longer serves the business and industry and the students of that region. So we'll move on. Were there any questions on the suspensions? You'll hear that twice a year. You get the new programs quarterly and suspensions twice a year.
The students that are involved in those suspended programs, what type of care is given to them to make sure they're aware that they're not anticipating coming back in a year or 2 and then finding out that it's closed out? What kind of aftercare happens?
So each college is responsible for notifying current students in the program, but also those that have maybe suspended their studies within the last few years, and told that those students tell those students they have up to 5 years to complete the program. Now, I will say sometimes, you know, there's a loss of a faculty member in there, and at that point, you have to really work with other colleges to make, you know, that offer the program to try and make sure that you're able to meet their requirements. It's not such a big deal on the smaller certificates, but certainly on the 60 credit hour Associate of Applied Science, you really have to do your due diligence.
And that's proactively offered?
Yes, that's part of their accreditation requirements, that when you suspend a program, you have to inform the individuals affected.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah.
So this is just sort of a reminder. We take our enrollment census weekly and report that out across the system so that dual credit coordinators know how many dual credit students are in the pipeline. Our workforce folks know how many workforce students. We disaggregate students by all sorts of various student groups, by their age, by their gender, by their resource status, all sorts of different ways. And so in your packet, when you look at the enrollment report that I shared with you, there's a link at the top, and that gives you access to this screen. It's a weekly dashboard of our enrollment, and that screen will change every week as we move through the term. And what you're seeing on here, the gray bars are the enrollment at that college last year, and the gold bar is the enrollment this date, same date to date by a year, and the gold bar is the enrollment at that college this year. And so it gives you can see how colleges are doing on a weekly basis. Then on November 1st, we pull the last snapshot of enrollment data for the term. Even though enrollment might change after that date, we pulled the data from end of day, midnight of October 31st. It's the last thing people have to do on Halloween. And then there's an equivalent date in our spring semester. And we use that as our official head count, our official census data. But the weekly is a really good way for our presidents, our chief student officers, many others at the colleges to really keep watch of what's going on. And we do have enrollment through the semester. We have, depending on the college, we have 16-week, 12-week. We have one college, I think, with 15-week and several with 8-week enrollments and a few with 5 and 4-week enrollments. So you really can be adding to that group of enrollees, all the way through the semester. So what I invite you to do is look at that link, go to that Tableau site where you can get into even more in depth on each of these and keep a weekly look at what we're doing. Any questions on enrollment?
This means we're down 9.3% for fall to fall, or is it?
No, it means that we have not reached our October 31st. We have not reached our enrollment census data of October 31st. We have 9% to go, but we're trending ahead. So we're hopeful that we'll actually exceed this semester last year.
And this URL this is a public link, so this
Yes.
URL can be shared with the board.
Yes, it's in the document, but you can share it with others if you're interested.
Mr. Williams, I have one quick question, please. With the enrollment, is that disaggregated to where you could actually look at how that is channeled to where you can actually see revenue equivalency for the enrollment? Like, is this enrollment meaning they're all generating the same revenue, or could some of this be 50%?
You can look at it by
Waivers?
We expand it by waivers and any number of things. I don't know if that's on the public site. The weekly enrollment report does give by dual credit status, by workforce status, and gives a waiver and tuition report. That's an internal report that certainly could be shared with the board as Dr. Zarapata chooses. But I don't know, the external one will not go into what kind of tuition it is, but it does break down into what kind of pots of students they are, so you could maybe make some assumptions. Sure. The last thing I'd like to do, Hannah, if you don't mind, is just highlight 4 things very briefly. Exciting news for our colleges and our system. We have two CPE projects that were funded by the legislature this last year. We received workforce trust funds of $2.25 million. We used an internal application system, and 15 colleges split that money and are using it for a variety of projects. 4 colleges are doing short-term healthcare certificates out of that. There are several that are either adding new CDL programs or increasing their CDL programs. There's such a need for that employment across the Commonwealth. We've got a couple that are focusing on dual credit, just a lot of different initiatives, but an excellent way to expand our outreach. The goal of these funds was to increase credentials in the 5 high-need sectors. So those sectors are set by the Kentucky Workforce Innovation Board. They include healthcare, advanced manufacturing, business and industry, construction and trades, and transportation and logistics. So all of these colleges are expanding their credentials in that way. Then there was also a $10 million grant given to CPE to support healthcare initiatives directly. Those are grant funds, they're federal grant funds that CPE is managing. 4 million of those dollars were allocated to KCTCS. Again, we used an internal process, and there are a lot of really innovative programs that are being supported through this. And I want to give a shout out to Regent Jackson, because she has been advocating for some time for a way to increase nursing faculty that hold the master's degree, Nurse Educators of Tomorrow program. And we were able to fund 20 slots to use system-wide for bachelor degree holding nurses to move to master degree holding nurses in NKU's online nurse educator program. So kudos to you, Dr. Jackson, for that. So we've got 20 nurses very excited to be starting their master's program fully online in an accelerated format. But we had a number of projects there, and we're able to leverage some of the trains funds that Jesse Shook will be talking about later to actually pay for some things for some colleges so we could make that $4 million go even farther. The third thing is $2.823 million available to provide scholarships. These are for refugee populations, for people who have been displaced through a war, like Ukrainians, through conflict in their internal conflict, through natural disaster, and who come here under refugee status. And so that money that can be awarded is not just tuition and fees, but can actually go up to the cost of attendance, which is over $10,000. So it's a really great way to bring these folks into the community and educate them and provide opportunities to get them into the workplace and self-supporting as quickly as possible. It's a brand new scholarship that's, again, going through CPE, and we have 110 people already enrolled, which is pretty good when we got the money like 2 weeks before the term started. So we're very excited about that. And then finally, you all know that we had 4 colleges whose student and regional populations were really affected by the tornadoes last year, 3 that were just really hit with flooding in eastern Kentucky. We know it's a small thing on these folks' big list of getting back together, but we are waiving the cost to replace printed credentials for them. So if a credential was lost in the tornado or flooding, these individuals will have the opportunity to replace it for free instead of the $25 normal charge. And the system office is offsetting the cost of printing. So the colleges and system office get to work together in that. So really excited with that initiative. And with that, I am done, Dr. Zarapata.
Thank you very much. And I failed to do something, and I apologize. I want to recognize our presidents that we've got sitting here in the gallery. Dr. Ferguson, Dr. Sellers, Dr. Reese, Dr. Neal, Dr. Linden, Dr. McCullough, and Dr. Young.
Thank you. All workforce development.
Yes. I'm happy to introduce our Acting Vice President of Workforce and Economic Development. I want to call to your attention something that's in front of you. I'm really proud of this. I'm proud of Jessie and her team. This is the annual report. In there, you'll find a coupon for 75% off for trains funding, which I thought was really cool. Also, she's going to talk about the workforce dashboard. But anyway, take it away. Thank you, Jessie.
Anna, do you have the PowerPoint? Well, I have excellent news to share with you all today. There's a stamp on the cover of that annual report, which indicates we have seen in the history of KCTCS the highest performing year since the trains funding was legislatively allocated over 20 years ago. So this is really great news. There are several reasons that contributed to this success. One of those reasons was in September of 2021, with full PLT support, we determined that we would slightly modify our funding model to provide additional support to Kentucky companies. Coming out of the pandemic, we knew that companies were struggling to invest in training and development. And so we moved that funding model from a 50-50 split with a 10% administration fee to a 75-25 split with a 10% administration fee. Companies are able to access up to $300,000 a year in funding. So essentially offsetting the cost of that by $225,000. We did have concerns when we made that modification. We didn't have enough data to know if that could possibly contribute to a reduction in new customers with us simply increasing the amount of funding we were providing to existing customers. So it was a concern going in, and that's one of the reasons that we created the workforce dashboard and have been monitoring over time the number of new clients that we had been bringing into our portfolio. If you'll flip into that cover, the second cover, Hannah, actually, if you go to the next slide, it's up there too. You will see that we are extremely excited to announce that that did not happen. We did not have to modify that funding model into the fiscal year. We have increased the number of new company clients served by 147%, which is a really incredible differentiation of our portfolio. Not only did this funding model contribute to this great success in the number of companies impacted and employees impacted, and in the breadth and depth of training that we were able to provide, it also allowed us to begin marketing for the first time trains funding. And this is something that we could not have done without Dr. Zarapata's support. We asked for a modest allocation of $250,000 for marketing, and we have strategically placed those dollars behind radio, behind creating content at each of the colleges. So you'll see some of that here in just a moment, but really helping each of the colleges to build that portfolio of imagery, of social media content, of radio announcements that they can utilize. And we created a Trains logo for the first time to develop a brand around Trains. We really believe that this marketing has also contributed to the increase in number of dollars allocated and enrollments across the system. But I am even more excited to share with you all that only a couple months into this fiscal year, we have allocated more than half of our $4 million allocation, which is incredible. Lisa's goal was that we run out of money, and we are going to run out of money this year. There is no question about it. So this is very exciting news for us. We continue to serve repeat clients. We're serving more new clients. We're seeing deeper investment, not only in the dollars that we're contributing, but also in the dollars that companies are contributing to invest in their workers. And so, Hannah, if you'll move to the next slide, I want to just show you all, this is a very brief video of one of the sort of highlights from both the worker and employer perspective. And we are putting dollars behind these in each of the college's markets to ensure that more employers become aware of Trains opportunities.
Kindergarten, they always ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? And so I've always wanted to do something in healthcare. My love for people and caring for others and just making them feel as best as they can was the real reason I wanted to do nursing. Hi, I'm Cheyenne. I'm going to take your blood pressure if that's all right.
To know that what we're giving back into is we're investing in someone who is in turn investing their future and their career into taking care of other people. And so that means the world to me.
The fact that management believes in me, it definitely encourages me and makes me feel more confident. Even though it's just a 2-year college, that 2-year college has helped me buy a new house, a new car, a new truck for me and my fiance.
Whatever industry someone works in, if you are looking to grow your workforce, one of the best things you can do is reach out to your local community college. They're your backdoor neighbor, they're your partner. You will know those people, you can develop those relationships, and then you can help invest in the people who are going to become a part of your workforce, who are going to turn around and be vested into your company and help your company grow and thrive.
This would not be possible without Dr. Zarapata's support on this marketing investment. And to be honest, it's a shame that we hadn't been marketing trains in the past. I really appreciate his leadership and recognizing that and supporting us in getting the word out and really ensuring that we're able to serve more Kentucky companies and more workers. So thank you, Dr.
Yeah, I'll just
Zarapata.
make one comment, and this was just insane to me. So I'm on the board of the Kentucky Association of Manufacturers, and first meeting in, it's a group of about 40 people. I asked, who's heard of trains funds before? Not a single person in there had known about it. And so this is why we need to really invest in marketing to get the word out.
Well, that's a great segue into the next point that I wanted to make. It's not only the employer communities that we are strategically trying to inform about this trains funding opportunity, it's also our workforce development ecosystem partners. Those partners are boots on the ground in their communities, whether they're at their local workforce innovation board or their local Goodwill, nonprofits, high schools. All of those different professionals in the workforce development ecosystem can help us organically market this as they're meeting with companies. And so we know that it's a very confusing sometimes landscape because we have so many assets in our state related to workforce funding, programming, initiatives. Sometimes it can get competitive. So we're really working through an effort we call the Collaborative Business Outreach Team to build trust amongst other workforce practitioners and cross-promote all of the different resources that we have to offer. We're currently working on cross-promoting Bluegrass State Skills Initiative, and this is a win-win because it makes it easier for employers to understand how they can braid these opportunities, but it also ensures that when our colleagues at the Office of Employer and Apprenticeship Services sit down with a company and they hear, we'd love to invest in training, but we just don't have the dollars, they have access to our marketing materials on a SharePoint hub. They know what trains is, and they can very easily promote it in that moment. One of the areas that we have been reporting on the dashboard, which you'll also see at your seat, is sector investments. This was something that the board had requested about a year ago in the initial annual report that we provided last year. And you'll see that a significant amount of our investments is in the manufacturing space. We're really looking at design and the bottlenecks in our operational process. And this is a challenge across all of our divisions. It's a challenge in the career and technical education space, in post-secondary in secondary education. It is very difficult to find available subject matter experts who want to leave the industry and come into the classroom and make a lot less money. Right? So we're trying to creatively approach. We're actually working with Norm Damaris's company called Tier 1 in Northern Kentucky, and they're providing some consulting services right now for us for free to help us understand how we might approach that subject matter expertise challenge that we're facing from a different angle. So is it something that we could think about from a perspective of having instructional designers who instead sit down with, let's say, someone who has a background in electric vehicle battery production, learn all that they can and work with them to create the curriculum rather than relying on trying to find an instructor, which does create a bottleneck for us, especially in sectors that are paying a significant amount of money where it's difficult to bring those folks into the classroom. Can you go to the next slide, please, Hannah? We've also been sharing metrics with you all on our business liaison outreach into the community. And this is probably one of the most important things that I want to share with you all today. I've mentioned in the past that we are really focusing on improving our Salesforce platform. We had in the past been using Salesforce only if we knew a trains project was going to close. We weren't using Salesforce for any other types of business engagements, direct pay. None of that was captured in Salesforce. So the Workforce Solutions team has done a tremendous job in adapting to additional data entry. So we're getting better about putting in contacts with any company that we meet with, but there's still challenges because these are just the companies that Workforce Solutions meets with. There are contacts within academic programs. Our FAME programs, for example, rely on very strong employer partnerships. Our relationships from the foundation don't get funneled into our Salesforce instance. So right now, under the leadership of Kyla Smithers and the Workforce Solutions team, we are attempting to integrate all of these different sources of employer relationships, and it's going to be a big lift, and it's probably going to take 2 to 3 years to get us to a place where we really have a comprehensive view of these relationships. But it is imperative that we do this. Recently, I attended the SETA conference and spoke with my counterpart in the Georgia Community College system, and they too are trying to wrap their heads around how do we ensure that we are capturing the scope and depth of all of our different employer partnerships. Part of the challenge here is when we think about increasing the portfolio and increasing the depth of relationship, it's going to be much easier to go to a company and say, I see that you're already on an advisory committee for this particular academic program. Can I tell you a little bit more about what we're doing to offer high quality internships? Would you be interested in that? So moving employers sort of on that more transactional edge of the scale to the transformational, deepening the partnership along the way, and really looking at how can we interact and engage with employers in different activities and instances rather than just going in and pitching one type of partnership or one type of initiative with the college. So soon we will have data integrated from Handshake, from Blackbaud, Razor's Edge, which is what the foundation uses. And as a reminder, Handshake is our work-based learning platform. And we will also be providing an asset map with a depth of relationship scale. So this, again, this is a very heavy lift. It will be a work in progress, but I will be excited to update you all on this effort at the next board meeting. Hannah, could you go to the next slide? There's a lot going on in Kentucky in terms of economic development, and KCTCS has been at the forefront of those conversations. KCTCS has committed more than $7 million for new or expanding companies in the state of Kentucky. Some of those dollars had been allocated through Senate Bill 5 for the Blue Oval SK and the Envision projects. But part of the improvement here is due to a strengthened relationship with the Cabinet for Economic Development. So in the past, when the cabinet would build out their incentive packages, they would usually just put a placeholder in for trains. It would say TBD. What happens is the companies locate, things start moving, you break ground, you're worried about your plant manager, you're worried about your energy sources, you're worried about a lot of things, and the workforce incentive funding falls off the radar. And so we have worked really hard to establish regularly scheduled meetings with the Cabinet for Economic Development. We have a shared spreadsheet and common non-disclosure agreements with that cabinet to ensure that if there is a company that could benefit from immediately partnering with a KCTCS institution right out of the gate, we have a trains offer on the table. We've empowered our presidents as well as our workforce solutions leaders to let us know when there are economic development projects happening at the local level that may not go through the state cabinet, to allow them the opportunity to come to us and say, here's how many workers they're trying to bring in, here's the skill set, and we have a formula to determine how many dollars we can put behind that project. We're really excited to see the movement in this area because this positions our system up front. As soon as a company begins to consider the Commonwealth of Kentucky, they know the name KCTCS and they understand that we are their preferred talent provider. We are Kentucky's workforce infrastructure. Hannah, could you go to the next one? So briefly, I'll mention just some updates around talent development. We're really in a situation where supply and demand is not going to be the solution anymore. The skills gap is a very real problem, and lifelong learning must be the approach. Constant upskilling. I mean, think about in your own career how often you have to learn a new skill. This is just not as simple as enrolling students in a specific program. Then companies come in, and they say this all the time when we meet with them. They say, we just want to come into the classroom and get in front of your students. We just want to hire your students or have a career fair. Well, most of our students are already spoken for. So again, moving from that transactional sort of one-to-one relationship where we're just promoting job opportunities with KCTCS students to really building out fundamental partnerships in order to work collaboratively with companies, help recruit students collaboratively, ensure not only that their pathway is aligned with what's needed in industry, but also affording them opportunities to gain experience and relevant skills through work-based learning or through classroom experience that is built out really in the guise of case studies that they would experience in the workplace. And so to do that, we have brought on an executive director of what we're calling workforce talent development. I settled on that title because this goes a little bit further beyond work-based learning. And I'll give you an example of that. We hear a challenge from IT employers very frequently that regardless of whether they're coming out of a 2-year or a 4-year or a boot camp, IT employers really want to see that they have contextualized experience. And oftentimes you hear that students are struggling to find a foot in the door at an IT company without 2 to 3 years of relevant experience. So one of these solutions could look like building out a finishing school for IT students across the system with remote work opportunities, with 1099 high-paying work opportunities, and then building a network of contractors who are partnered with some of our major IT employers that won't back down from that 2 to 3 years. But if these individuals, if these graduates and up and coming graduates are employed with these contractors who might then provide mentoring and may actually even gain some business from this model in contracting with those larger companies, the companies have said, we'll back down from 2 years and we'll look at them after 12 months or 18 months. So again, it's so much more complex in the economy that we're living in right now than just saying we're going to increase the number of students in our IT pathways. So those are some of the types of projects that this individual will be working on. Her name is Tanel Sawyer, and she will be serving in that role. She started with us about a month ago and has hit the ground running. All of work-based learning will be within her portfolio. And that's going to really require a strong partnership between the Chancellor's Office and Workforce and Economic Development, between Academic Affairs and between Student Services to ensure that those experiences align with what's being taught in the classroom and that those students have the wraparound support and connectivity to know and understand that those experiences are there for them. That is all I have for you all today. If you have any questions, I am happy to answer them and really excited to share this progress with you all. I'm looking forward to telling you very soon that we've ran out of money and we're looking for other avenues to support companies, which will only position us to advocate for more dollars as we continue to position ourselves as the preferred talent provider for Kentucky employers. Thank you.
Jesse, thank you again. If there's any questions, please let us know. But I think, the board was very adamant over the past 2 years talking about our focus on workforce, and I think you're starting to see the fruits of that. Thank you, Jesse. That was
Thank you.
really good.
Next item on the agenda, President Zarpata, Beverly Malone.
Yes, sir. And so Beverly Malloy is going to be giving our administrative services update. She'll go over the quarterly financial reports, revenue and expenses, as well as our net position. And then Andy Casebeer is going to have a brief PowerPoint on energy savings performance contracts. Thank you, Beverly.
Good afternoon. As Dr. Zarpata said, I am going to review our expenses, our revenues and our expenses, as well as our net position. Next slide, please. And this shows our budgeted revenues against our actual revenues, our budgeted expenses against our actual expenses. And so there are some outstanding changes that I'd like to speak to. For example, in our state appropriations, I'm sorry, I keep walking away from the microphone. I'm accustomed to teaching and walking to the board. In our state appropriations, you will see a difference of about $5 million. And that difference is from the $5 million that was also appropriated for the trains. I'm sorry, not for trains, but for our Blue Oval training facility with ECTC. Okay. Any questions about that? Okay. Next, our non-credit tuition. And again, we can credit that to our increase in the number of credential seeking students. And you see the increase from 76%. And there we have next is our investment income. As we know, there is an inverse relationship between increasing interest rates and bonds. And so that is what we are experiencing, that negative 611. However, in the total portfolio, there is a decrease of 2.7%, or less than 3%, okay? And in addition to that, KCTCS does not have control over the majority of its investments. The investments take place through the State Investment Commission, and we do know that the Commonwealth of Kentucky lost $9 million. And so we're hoping for improvements, and we have expectations that it will take place. The other item I wanted to bring to your attention was under our expenditures. Could you scroll down, please? Okay, under institutional support, you'll see a reduction in our expenses from 106 to 72. We credit that to the monies received from HERF funding, when we were able to spend it. In addition to that, for our operations and maintenance, because we spent in the previous year, during FY22, we did not have to transfer monies from operating to plant funds. And that is why you see the decrease. Okay. So as it relates to our total expenditures and budget reserve, our final revenue is 134,550. Is that clear to everyone? The next item I will address is the balance sheet or net position. Okay, when we look at our current assets of 395,743, and our current liabilities, we have a 7-to-1 ratio, which creates soundness. Normally in business, a 2-to-1 ratio is an indication of sound financial structure. There are many other ratios that we like to present to the board in the near future, but we looked at the current ratio at this moment. And then at the bottom, you see our unrestricted funds. We have unrestricted funds of 75,532. And that is monies that we can use to provide educational support and services and equipment to our students. Any questions? I know that I was brief. However, if there are questions, specific questions that you have, feel free to contact us, because I knew that you had reviewed this information previously in your board packet. Okay. Any
These are all in
questions?
thousands, right?
I'm sorry.
These are all in thousands.
Correct. Yes. And it's tiny. It's written up at the top in thousands. Yes.
I know, Beverly, that this is the systems. How are the 16 colleges doing? There's some doing better than others for its financial?
I cannot answer that question specifically right now, but we can get that information to you with
I
the
just think
facts.
maybe the next time we'd like to have a summary, or I would, a summary of how the colleges are doing and where they're, if there's any colleges that are struggling or having problems. I think we'd like to be aware of that to see what resources can be found for them. Thank you.
Correct. We will make sure that that information is available.
Thank you, Beverly.
Thank you.
I'd like to introduce now probably one of the busiest people on the planet. Andy Casebeer has been all over the state with facilities projects in the Blue Oval SK and in Hardin County, and unfortunately with the flooding in eastern Kentucky as well. So
Yeah, it's been a busy year. I'm just going to give you a nickel's worth of explanation of how ESPC projects work. I'm going to do it really briefly, but then I'm trying to allow time for you to ask questions if you have specific questions about them. So going to the next slide. First of all, what an ESPC project is, Energy Savings Performance Contract. It allows our colleges to make improvements to the building. I mean, that's actually equipment like boilers and chillers and lights, and to make those improvements that cause us to have an energy savings without any upfront cost and without any appropriation or use of restricted funds to do it. Sounds wonderful. So the way ESPC projects came about was KRS 56. There's a section there. Oh, I'm sorry, Hannah, go on to the next slide. And what KRS 56 did, that section that was added about 10, 12 years ago, it does a lot of things for all state buildings all over the state. But basically it says that they've set up this program for ESPC projects where you do an energy, it requires an energy engineering analysis of the systems in your building. Then it requires you to look for energy efficiency measures that you can take that don't cost any money. And then it has you look at the building to see what improvements you can make. And, you know, some of our buildings are rather old. And so we have electrical switchgear or chillers that are from the 1960s. In a few colleges, it's a little bit older than that. And so they take all this into account and they figure out, these engineers, ESCOs are what they're called, it's energy savings consultants, you know. They figure out what you can do and they put numbers to everything. You know, if you get a new chiller, it's this much. If you do this, it's this much. If you change out light bulbs, it's this much. And they figure out what that would cost and what the energy savings would be if you do it. And then they tell you, you can do these things under this program and save this much energy so you actually come out ahead, which is the whole idea. You know, you're funding the purchase of this equipment and labor for this with the savings from the energy until it pays out. So that's kind of the gist of what 56 said to do. And then it requires us to monitor the energy performance over the term of that contract, which can be, you know, 10 years and 15 years, 20 years, maximum is 25, to make sure that we are in fact saving the energy consumption that we were told we were going to. So it's a guaranteed savings. There's no risk to us. There's risk to the ESCO if they mess that up. So the next slide, there are two things that can happen. First of all, they might identify some things that either cost no money, like you have 3 chillers in your building that all come on at 6 o'clock in the morning. If you space those out where they're 15 minutes apart, your peak usage of electricity goes down and the utility company charges you based on your peak. So if you can get your peak down, then that saved money. All you do is making a little adjustment on when you turn the things on. And of course, we have automated systems that do that, but it's just little tweaks like that. Then they'll come up with other things that you can do. Fix the doors so that they're weatherproof. You know, they have put weather stripping on it. Well, it's really inexpensive. There's no use to finance that anyway. So they just advise you of those things that you can do on your own. And the law says if it's under 5 years to pay that back, you need to do it either with your own funding or to seek state funding or some other source of funding to do that. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff that we pick up that are just low-hanging fruit, saves a lot of money. And then where ESPC contracts come in is when you have large pieces of equipment or large systems that you can make adjustments to or change out that will take you, 10, 15, 20 years to see the payback of that. So what they do is they come up with a thing and they call it cash flowing. So they have to make it to where your expenditure minus minus the cost of that, related to your savings, that you have more savings than you're spending. So it starts out as a bonus. And then as you go on and things drop off that you've paid this for this 5 years down the road, or you pay for this 12 years down the road, then you start seeing that money in your pocket. So, so the next slide. So what they're looking for, their benefits and key characteristics, but basically what we're looking for is to do an energy engineering analysis in order to save energy, figure out how much that costs, how much do we save, can we do it without really costing any money? And so the next slide, it's got a graph. I'm going to try not to walk over to the screen to show you. But so what they do is, the first thing they do is, the engineers working with our college folks and with facilities, we analyze all the utility data for whatever's available the last several years, up to 5 years. We try to see what our energy costs really are, because it does fluctuate from year to year, season to season. But we come up with a baseline that says, before we did anything, this is our utility cost. This is how much we spend in utilities over that time. So that becomes the baseline. Then what the ESCO has to do is come up with things so that they're going to provide this equipment, they're going to install it in your building, you're going to pay them over through, well, they're going to get paid immediately, but you're going to take out a loan for however long you need to be able to pay that off and it can't be longer than the payout for one specific. So if you have a chiller that takes 20 years and then you have something else that takes 5 years, it varies. That's why the loan will change. But so they have to do that. They have to also build into that number a reserve account, which is there during the life of the contract. If something happens that causes your energy consumption to go up, that they need to replace something or something else, that reserve account's there for that. It kind of gives them a little fudge. And then it has to also show that you immediately save money, so that what you're paying into the ESCO account is less than what you were already spending on utilities based on that baseline. And it's guaranteed. So they have to guarantee us that that is our worst case. We're going to at least save this much money. And if they don't in any given period of time, then they have to make it good. Right. So they really have a lot of incentive to find ways for us to do this. So that's the goal. Now, the reserve account that I said that we set up, and it's kind of an escrow account that keeps this money in it. If we get to the end of the term and it hasn't been used or wasn't needed for something that's very specific about what it can be used for, then that money just reverts back to us. So we get it. So there's been no upfront cost. The college hasn't paid any more money than they would have if they just kept their old systems and kept the utilities going like they were, but they would be paying the utility company instead of paying themselves. Now, there are other benefits to this because we improve the environment for our students. So we have, warmer winters and colder summers, and better air circulation and all that. So all that stuff gets improved. Then during the ESCO period, it's monitored, and we're on a state of Kentucky system called CMSIS, which is Commonwealth Energy Management, something. Sorry, I just go by CMSIS for so long I don't remember anymore. But what it does is we can see from the system office and from the Division of Engineering, who's helping us make sure these ESCO counts work, they can actually see trends of what's going on in our buildings, trend data. So we can discover if there's an issue. And sometimes over the life of a building, something may get out of tune, or the filters can get changed, or something happen like that, and you'll see this piece of equipment's not acting like it's supposed to. And so we can very quickly go in and make those adjustments. So that happens over the life of the term. And during the first 2 years, that ESCO is also helping us. They meet with us monthly. We discuss the trending data we have going on. We see that we're making the energy savings, and they also, along the way, discover other little low-hanging fruit, no-cost things that we can do. Oh, wait, if you'll adjust this chiller in this way, then you've saved some more money. So the whole idea is not to spend more money than you already are, and getting the infrastructure, which sometimes is very costly, to improve those. So that's all I'm going to tell you. And then I'm just open for questions because I know that was brief and it's this program, I could spend like a day or two actually explaining to you.
Your,
but-
your passion comes through, Andy. Thank you.
Sorry, sorry.
Any questions for Joe?
Yes, sir.
Where do those reserves land on the balance sheets for the colleges? You know,
The-
that,
The ESCO holds it. So it's
Oh,
part of what we pay to the ESCO or to the, it's not actually the ESCO. The ESCO gets paid up front. It's held by our financing bank, right, as part of our thing. But this much goes to the payment and this much goes to reserve. So they keep track of it. We actually have full access to see how that's going. We get involved if we need to spend some of it. You know, it's really carefully controlled. And the goal is to give that back to you. You know, it's just a little cushion because things happen, you know, climates change and all that kind of stuff. But so that's how that works. Now, just to give you an update, because this has just recently happened and we're actually going to talk about it a little bit tomorrow because I have a couple of action items I need you to take. But ESCO, these ESPC projects were very low interest. Like it was 1.25%, 1.5%, 2% loans over the last 10 years. And we've taken advantage of those over these 10 years. And we've saved over $30 million in utility costs for the Commonwealth. Every college has been through first round of all that because we go through and we find stuff when we do it. All but 3 have now been through a second round of that. So they've done projects there. The other 3 were in the process of working with them. So we're constantly, and because we have this trend data that we're monitoring every month, we actually see what's going on with that. But now, because of the economy, the interest rates, as it has for everything else, has gone up. So we're not, it's not really to our advantage to take interest in that because we're paying too much in interest. So that's why we're talking to you more about that. But we'll go back to it as soon as interest rates come back down.
Andy, Regent Fletcher had her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So when we got the ESCO report in May, it showed us that that all of the colleges had been through the first round, but in the round 2 performance contracts, we were still missing one. I believe that was Hazard.
Yes,
Is
we
that correct?
tried to, Dr. Linda can speak this, but we tried to do a second round there and we couldn't make the cash flows work at the time. We're still looking at that and looking at the data we collected and try to get it. Something to keep in mind though, just so you know, we really don't have a lot of risk in this. When the ESCO company is hired to go in and analyze it to see what we can do, if they don't come up with anything that we can do, they don't get paid. They just go home. So it's really a golden project that the legislature came up with that helps all state buildings, but us in particular to do that.
So we had Gateway and Southeast anticipated to start either this year or next year. Have those 2 come online yet?
Those are the 2 we'll talk about tomorrow with your action items. I want to talk to you about what we should do there. But
Okay.
yes, we already know what we need to do.
So not counting them, the anticipated savings was 51.1. Will
Yes.
they add to that or are we not going to go forward with them and then?
Well, we
I
will
don't wanna
go,
get too
we will
far.
go forward with them and so that will change things. But also you got to understand if we do 5 years ago, 10 years ago, if we changed the chiller at one of the college buildings, that new chiller is still more efficient than the old chiller. So we actually see more savings to that every year. So the beauty is once we've paid off the debt to buy the equipment that's in this ESCO, our savings continues on. So the operating cost for the college is always lower than it was before. So this isn't something you do and we saved, $1 million this year and we're done. We saved $1 million this year. We're going to save roughly that amount next year. And then after the contract expires, when it's paid for, we're actually seeing a bigger savings.
Well, kudos on the improvements from 28.1 to 51.1 million in savings in those round 2.
Yes.
So thank you for what you're doing. That's exactly the kind of initiatives we're looking for.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Andy.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. Dr. Sarapata, the next item.
Yes, I'm excited for Lynn Hillis to be giving her first presentation from Talent, Inclusion, and Workplace Culture Report. She's going to be giving you a presentation on her plans for the department, HR dashboard, and much, much more. I think you will see that she is taking HR from a transactional department to more of a strategic one, and take it away.
Oh, thank you. So I am very excited to be here at my first board meeting and very excited to be part of the KCTCS family. Excuse me, I've got a frog in my throat as well. So the more I talk with individuals, the more I hear the passion about the students, particularly from our college presidents. And I'm hoping that we can continue to enhance our faculty and staff engagement, which ultimately then impacts our student engagement. So what I'd like to talk with you about today is a little bit about my thoughts on where we are with HR, some of my initial observations, talk about 3 strategic pillars that I see from an HR perspective to help us move from transactional to transformational. And also give you some updates on some projects that you may know about, but some new projects that you may not know about's going on. Great work that the team is doing as well. So next slide, Hannah. Thank you. So it was interesting as I was listening to Jessie talk, I heard her say the words transactional, transformational as well. So when you think about HR, what you really think about is how HR can provide value, but then you want to think about how can HR really create value for the organization. And so I've spent some time with the HR peer team on this particular slide, and we had a lot of great discussion. And we're all in agreement that right now we believe that HR is delivering and providing value. So we're transactional in what we do. We have some processes, some procedures. We have scalable technology. We're on PeopleSoft, and all 16 colleges use PeopleSoft as well as the system office. We do have some work that we need to do on our policies and procedures. From what I understand, particularly in the HR area, there's work that needs to be done there. So Pam and I are starting to work on that. So a lot of work with there. As I listened to some of the previous board meetings and listened to some of the questions that you as Regents asked, they were more transformational in nature. So that told me that you're looking for HR to be more transformational. Things like, what are you doing around succession planning? What's your performance management like? What are you doing around DEI? So those are some of the things that I want to be able to do, our HR peer team wants to be able to do, and we've actually heard from our Board of Regents that you're very supportive of that as well, particularly in the commitment to the employee, which is very important to HR and our partnership with the college presidents and the peer team as well. So the next slide is how I think about HR strategy. And I think about HR strategy in 3 different areas. So you have your HR excellence, which is really around your operational side of things, your transactional side of things. You have talent management and total rewards. And what I would point out here is the items in gold are the items that we really want to be able to move towards. And that is taking us more to that transformational HR. Doing that at the system office as well as in the colleges. So in the HR excellence bucket, we are doing some things around systems data. We pull a lot of reports every day from PeopleSoft around data. And we're moving towards HR technology. I'm going to talk about a new applicant tracking system today, which I'm very excited about. And then when you move into the talent management strategic pillar, I think that's where we probably have the most work to do. So that's where you'll see the work with DEI, strategic talent planning, planning for the future, your employee engagement. And one of the things that Dr. Zarapata said to me when I first started, or when I interviewed actually, was we want to be an employer of choice. And so that's really how you manage the talent and the kind of experiences that you create with that talent. Finally, in total rewards, I know that the Board of Regents is very interested in this particular strategic pillar, as I've listened to a lot of feedback about our compensation as well as feedback about our benefits. And we'll talk a little bit about that today as well. But through all of these strategic pillars, we want to do that through the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's from the day that somebody looks at our website and wants to apply for a position here at KCTCS. What's the experience? How do they feel when they look at that website? We also want to be more transparent in our communications. And one of the things you'll think about with change management is the very first rule that you can have is to communicate. And when you think you've communicated enough, you need to communicate more. So we really want to do that as well. Culture, we heard a lot about culture. Again, putting our employees at the forefront of what we do, and then that transcends into our student experience as well. And want to be an engaging culture and create those experiences every day so that when our employees walk through that door, they feel welcome and they feel like this is the place that they really want to work. Change management. We have a lot of change going on. There'll be a lot of things that we want to do as an organization. And my hope is that our leaders will be equipped to be able to lead our employees through change. And when we do a change, they know exactly what to do that. And then Pam will appreciate this. We also need to make sure that we manage risk. So HR as well as legal, part of our responsibility is to help with risk within the organization. So any questions or thoughts on that? Yes.
I just want to, for you to understand is when you ask the community colleges for things, you know, and I'm sure you do, it needs to be expressed why you need this, how you're going to use it, how is it going to benefit them or their employees, and, you know, is it going to make the term our life or our job easier? Because I think that sometimes a lot of things come down and they're not used properly. So I would hope that not only in your department, but any department that we, when we go back to our colleges and ask for information, there is a specific reason and why we're doing it is, and what is it going to help them to accomplish? So.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Stevens. And one of the first things that I've learned is the relationship between HR and the colleges has to improve. And I've been spending quite a bit of time with the HR peer team. In fact, they helped me and they gave me feedback on this presentation as well. So that relationship is working. And I've been in the trenches myself, and I know what it's like to have somebody ask for data and then scramble around in a day to get it for a meeting. So completely understand that. So thank you for that.
And I think that it's very important for the feedback. Once you gather all the data and the information, how you're using it, and make sure that those HR people or the people that you've asked to do this, they understand how you're using it.
Yes, completely agree. We have some very talented HR people out in the field, very talented. And when they get the data, they know how to use it. Sometimes it's just hard to get the data. Very talented group. Any other questions or thoughts? Yes.
I just want to say it's very refreshing to see this. In the past, working for KCT, it seemed like HR was kind of a secret thing sometimes, but to see this in the strategic areas really, in my mind, is nice. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll give some kudos to, when I was interviewing Lynn, we had some group interviews and some one-on-one interviews, and she asked me several questions where I almost fell out of the chair. One was, when was your last employee satisfaction survey? And my mouth just kind of dropped open. I said, I don't know that we've ever done one. It was questions like that, that immediately shot her to the top of my list. And I was like, yeah, I think this is where we need to go. So thank you, Lynn.
Thank you, Dr.
And,
Fairpot.
So Chair Stevens and I were just having a little bit, a sidebar. I just want to clarify for him the use of the term not used properly. So our employees don't think that we've been out there improperly using their information. Just that sometimes it's collected and not used at all. Nothing's done with it. So just gathering, making sure our employees are not having a heart attack out there.
Lynn, if I could ask, you started 2 months ago, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
When is the employee satisfaction survey going out?
Well, so that's interesting that you should ask. So I talked to Dr. Zarapata about doing an RFP for an employee engagement survey, and it's actually, I believe it just came back last week. So we have a committee and we're going to be looking at which vendor we'd like to go with. And there are some colleges that currently do employee engagement surveys today. So hopefully when we get to the December meeting, I'll have some more information on that. But that really, you know, is we need that as baseline data to be able to identify what are the things that we need to improve on to increase those employee experiences. Every time you have an interaction with an employee, whether they walk in your office and you have your computer shut, that sends a message that you care. If you continue to type, you've created an experience which causes that employee to have a belief every moment matters. And so it's going to be great to get that data from that engagement survey.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
I just want to say welcome to Lynn. I'm really
Thank you.
excited about the presentation and everything that we're talking about today from an HR standpoint at the college. I know you and I had a conversation last week about some things, and I'm just really looking forward to working with you. I know we've got some great HR people at the colleges. We've got some great HR people at system office. So I think that will be key going forward is just our communication that we can work together. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We have some phenomenal people here. Any other questions or comments?
I would just ask that you not go too far away because the ROC committee report's coming up next and we're going to tag you for some information in that as well.
Yes, I heard that. Thank you. I'm looking forward to it, which leads me I think you just set me up to the next slide, Hannah, which is about our compensation RFP. So this RFP actually started before I got here and it was out to market. We had one vendor that responded and we decided that we wanted to enhance the compensation RFP and send it back out to market. So as I looked at the RFP, there was a lot of focus on equity and pay, which is very, very important. But that's not the only thing that we want our comp and class RFP to do. And specifically in the March meeting, when I listened to that, there were a lot of questions about equity in gender and ethnicity pay. There were a lot of questions about comparing to market. There were a lot of questions about, do we have staff career pathing the same way that we have faculty career pathing? So what I did was really looked at, if you think about that other the second strategic pillar around talent, I put a talent lens on as I enhance that RFP. And so one of the things that you really want a comp and class study to do is be very transparent about career pathing for your employees. And Pam, I hate to keep saying your name, but you gave a very simple explanation in that March meeting about what you've done with the legal group. And I'll say it simply. So I think you said attorney 1, 2, 3, 4. So when you've got clear career pathing, you have those career paths and you don't have to have somebody leave the organization to be able to promote someone. And that opens up career paths. The other thing that you want to do, and we've actually been doing this very well, is lateral moves. To move in your career is not necessarily always upward. It can be outward as well. And here at KCTCS, I believe we can do both. So the new RFP really spoke to what is our career framework and what are our job functions. So job functions are things like HR, IT, faculty. Sub-functions would be things like if I'm in HR, am I in benefits, compensation, talent acquisition, career band and career levels. Do we want broad banding where we have more broad market ranges with less bands, or do we want something different? Which leads us to comprehensive job descriptions and catalog. Today we have many, many different job descriptions for one particular position, and it could be different as you go across different colleges. Market analysis. There was a lot of conversation about market analysis in the March meeting. This is really, really important because it's one thing to change your market internally, but that's not going to help you compete external with competitors. And so we have to do a market analysis and see where we are with market. Part of that is the benefits that you offer in the retirement plan. And we need to have a philosophy. Does KCTCS pay at the 50th percentile? Are we 75th? Or are we 25th? How does that align with our benefits and our comp? And finally, job classification. This is where we manage risk. And this is about making sure that non-exempt employees are classified as non-exempt and exempt employees are classified as exempt. So we put that compensation RFP back out to the street the first week in September. And we're actually hoping that that will come back out. It will close on September 30th. And we were specific about, making sure that we had these enhancements in there. So I know this is very important to the Board of Regents. So what questions or comments?
I will just make one comment which I'll talk about a little bit here in a minute. In the other RFP, which was around resource optimization, I kept thinking about it, and there was so much bleed through from that into this that I said, why don't we check and see if this, company X does this type of thing? And so that's where we're at right now, is that we believe that we may be able to get some pretty major efficiencies by having one entity do all of this comprehensively. So more to come on that.
Yes, thank you. Any other thoughts or questions on the compensation piece? It's hard work. I've been in organizations where we've done this work before. It's not easy, it's hard, but the benefits to the organization and more important, the employee, once you get through that really this is about career pathing and about attracting talent. It's about retaining and attracting talent. So the next slide, Hannah, is 403B. And actually, this item will be discussed during tomorrow's meeting. I talked with General Counsel Pam, and she informed me that the board would need to vote on this. So in December. So tomorrow it will be an informational topic, which I'll share with you. So let's talk about the second item that I know the Board of Regents is very interested in as well. I inherited a lot of great things that people are interested in, benefits. So I actually believe that KCTC has pretty good health, dental, and vision benefits. Where we can enhance is with our supplemental benefits. We also have a pretty good retirement plan. It's hard to go out in the private sector or in higher ed and get a 10% match. So we do have a great start, but there are many, many things that we can look at. And I know that the HR peer team did a lot of work to put some benefit stuff together. When I heard that, the first thing I did was said, please get me a copy of that. I want to pull that out and work back with the HR peer team on that. So the benefits survey will go out with open enrollment. Open enrollment is October 10th through October 28th. And it actually has 11 questions. It's in test right now. We're having some people test it, and it's in the PeopleSoft system. So the way it works, when you go into open enrollment, you go into PeopleSoft, basically on the left side of the screen, you have basically a checklist. The first thing will be an overview on what will be expected. The next thing that will happen is employees will be taken to the benefits survey. Once they finish the benefits survey, then they go into open enrollment. So we should have that information the end of October. The goal is we would like to compile that information, get it back out to the Board of Regents prior to the December meeting, and then spend some time in the December meeting really talking about what we learned and some additional thoughts. I will also share with you that as we think about benefits, one way that we can begin to think about benefits is through our workforce and the different generations in our workforce. So about 25% of our workforce now are baby boomers, and they look for something much different than the 46% of our employees, which are Gen X. Now, to attract Gen Z, which we only have 4% of, you need different benefits and retirement to do that as well. So we really need to start to think about our workforce. Where do we have most of our workforce? Where do we need workforce to build our succession pipeline? And how do we enhance our benefits to do that? The other thing I'd like to do is we do benchmark with higher ed quite a bit, but for staff, we're competing with the private sector. And so I think we need to begin to benchmark there, but not just the private sector. Why wouldn't we benchmark with the best of the best, the Zappos, the Netflix, you know, some of those other great companies, because we can do some of that stuff here. We just need to take a look at it and work through it. So that's where we are with the benefits survey. Does anybody have any questions or comments on that? Yes.
One question. So when you're referencing open enrollment, I'm assuming that you are going to capture the various retirement categories and all that. Like if you're talking KCTCS open enrollment for KCTCS employees versus UK, they have different open enrollment periods. So you are going to allow, I guess, all the employees under that other enrollment?
Anybody that goes through open enrollment, and I'm sorry, I'm still new, but so I don't know if I know the answer to this. I don't
Well,
know.
the UK employees, they have their own benefits plan, and so we really can't.
Theirs is usually in April or May, I believe. They have a
Okay.
different enrollment period, so this will be for KCTCS personnel.
KCTCS. Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Well, as you can see, Lynn wasn't real happy with me her first weekend because I just had this whole big.
Oh my gosh, like,
Yeah.
you know, my first day, Lynn, we're going to be an employer choice. That's your number one goal. So, okay, so the next slide, please, Hannah, is I believe we have a better way to manage, an approach to managing our talent here at KCTCS. So one of the best ways to keep our board of regents apprised, our college presidents apprised of what's going on, our leaders across KTCS is with data. And when you look at data, when you look at the employee life cycle, there are definitely ways to align those. So we're currently working on an HR dashboard, and you saw the HR dashboard that Dr. Williams shared. It wasn't an HR dashboard, but her Tableau. We're looking at something very similar to that that's dynamic and in Tableau, and we'll be able to drill down by each college. Not easy to put together, but that's what we're working on now. The metrics will be in these 7 categories, which are fairly common. HR metrics, anywhere from what are your demographics, clear down to mobility and agility. So how many people are being promoted? Are we promoting diverse employees? Are we promoting all one type of employee? Are we moving people around lateral? When you really get into succession planning, then you're moving people around and high potentials and giving them various information. So I want to give you just a couple examples of some of the data that you'll see in that. So the average age and tenure of our workforce. I talked a little bit about that. That really gets us into how do we look at that age and tenure and get the right benefits and retire for them. The percentage of the workforce eligible for retirement. When you think about that as an HR person, you're thinking about succession planning. With 25% of the workforce being baby boomers, how many of those are in critical positions? Do we have single points of failures? Do we have successors for those individuals? The second metric, or one of the metrics you'll see, is the percentage of our employees that leave in the first 6 months. That tells us something else from an HR perspective. Are we doing a good job recruiting? Are we doing a good job recruiting for culture? Are we showing a realistic job preview? Are we orienting? Are we onboarding? Are our leaders creating those great experiences which make our employees want to stay? So those are just some of the metrics. There are many more, but I just wanted to share examples because those metrics tie into things that we do then from an HR perspective to enhance our employee experience. So any questions about the HR dashboard? And the HR peer team meeting did see the dashboard and the metrics, and they had some great feedback on that as well. All right, thank you. So this next one, I'm not sure that the Board of Regents has seen this or knew that this was going on, but this was happening before I got to KCTCS. And it is very exciting. So we are in the process of implementing a new applicant tracking system called Page Up. And an applicant tracking system is the way that candidates apply for positions at KCTCS, and it's the way that we look at resumes as we look at candidates and source a slate of candidates for our leaders. So there are two real benefits with Page Up. You have the user experience, which is the experience that we have internally, but more importantly, you have the candidate experience. So from the internal user experience, what Page Up does for us is it gives us this really, really powerful search engine. And if you think about it, if all these resumes come into our own database, we have a plethora of resumes that we can go in and search for. So let's say, for example, that Hannah applies for a position at KCTCS and she's what we may call a silver medalist. Maybe she's number 2, she didn't get hired. But 4 months down the road, we remember Hannah and we go back to that resume database and we proactively call her to try to get a position here at KCTCS. So that's a great thing that it does. It also has this recruiter dashboard. So one of the things you'll see is that we do not have great applicant tracking system today, and it doesn't give us a lot of great data. This is going to give us things like time to fill. How many diverse candidates do we have for a particular position? How many diverse candidates have applied? So there's a lot of different things. And this seems very simple, but this is a great example of moving from transactional to transformational. Today, when we have to get approval for an offer, a president will get an email, or Dr. Zarapata will get an email, or someone from an HR person will get an email and we'll say, do you approve this salary? And then we take that approval, we take those emails, we scan them into OnBase, and that is the way we keep that information. So with the applicant tracking system, it's an automatic flow. As soon as we make an offer to a candidate, it will flow through the appropriate workflow, and that workflow can even be different for every single college to meet that college's need. So that's a simple thing, but it shows how we can move from transactional to transformational. From a candidate experience, it's a unique experience from the time that that candidate applies to the time that they are selected. It's that very first view into KCTCS and what do you think as a candidate. So we're going to be able to put some videos out there that show some of our employees talking about our great purpose, how it resonates with them. We'll probably have Dr. Zarapata, some of the college leaders, put some videos out there. And it just provides this great experience that aligns with our brand, and it's a great first time experience. Much easier to apply as well. So Page Up is going to be awesome for us. We will be, as of 10/15, we'll take a 2-week hiatus where we will not post new jobs. Very normal when you do these ATS implementations. I've done some of them in the past. On 10/29, we'll come live with Page Up, and Higher Touch will still be there till the end of the year. Our colleges are involved with helping us design the system, as well as members of our HR peer team. A very exciting new piece of HR technology for KCTCS. So what questions do you have about this? Yes.
Will there be any integrations with Handshake? We already have a pipeline of student workers that, you know, we are also an employer, you know?
Yes, yes. I do not think at this time we do have an integration with Handshake, but I'm actually going to talk about Handshake a little bit on my next slide. But I can take that back to Chase Dodson, who's leading the implementation, and see if that's possible, because what you're doing then, and I think what you're suggesting, is then you've got even a larger resume database to pull from. Any other questions?
I think, as Joe knows, you can integrate with anything. It's just how much money and how much time it takes.
Yeah, it will integrate with PeopleSoft as our HRIS system of choice. All right. So the next slide was a result of Chairman Stevens asking for some information in one of the, I think it was a policy meeting, I'm not quite sure. And so, as I just mentioned before, our applicant tracking system does not do a very good job of giving us this data. So we did actually have to go back to the colleges and ask them to get that information manually for us. And so I want to thank the colleges for going out and gathering that for us to report back today. So as the colleges came back to us, we have 181 active positions. Now, those are positions that they're actively recruiting for. And of those positions, 66 of those, or 36% of those, are what the college is defined as hard to fill. Now, out of those 66 positions, there are some one-offs. But as I looked at the majority of those and looked at affinitizing those, what I came up with was these positions. And if any of the college presidents want to chime in, please do. The academic advisors, clinical instructors, custodial, various instructors like biology, information technology, and maintenance workers. And I don't think it's any surprise to anybody that clinical came out as something hard to fill. Even in my last employer in leading recruiting for a major hospital, we weren't able to crack that nut. It's a bigger issue than colleges and employees. It is we all know there's a clinical shortage. It's an issue in the United States. Many of us struggle to fill those positions, and I think we're still trying to do some things. As we think about the custodial and the maintenance workers, from the research that I've done and talking with some of the HR peer team as well, I think a lot of this is wage and compensation. So you can go to, we're competing with Walmart, McDonald's, Kroger's for these type of individuals. And some of them, I think Target might be paying, $15, $20 an hour. And so we've got to be able to compete with that. And that's another reason why this compensation study is so very important. The other question that Chairman Stevens asked was, what are we doing about trying to fill these hard to fill positions? So we recently hired an individual in the system office. His name is Chase Dodson, and he has a lot of talent acquisition experience, and he's very good at sourcing talent. And he's been able to begin to build a great relationship with the colleges and their HR team. And I see some people shaking their head there. So what he does is when the colleges have a hard time sourcing talent, they will pick up the phone and they will call Chase and he will help them. And some of the things that we're doing, not only looking at hard to fill positions, but also looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion. So Chase and Heather just recently introduced a system called Workplace Diversity. So what happens when we post on Workplace Diversity, our jobs get scraped into other job sites. And those are the Hispanic Diversity, Veterans Connect, Disability Connect, Women's Job Center, Black Job Center, Out and Equal, All Diversity, Latinx Job, and the LGBT Connect. So that's reaching out and trying to help us get some more diverse candidates. That's the start. We're not finished. The other piece is like I talked about with the applicant tracking system, for higher ed, most people will go to HERC or they will go to the Chronicle of Higher Education. We also have access to their resume database. So Chase will actively go in there and search, and he will pick up the phone or email and talk to people about, are you interested in coming to KCTCS? And you'll see all the other job boards that we use as well. But one of the neatest things, it actually isn't a rocket science idea, but it's the first time that we've done it here. So Chase actually once a month sends out an email blast to about 20,000 KCTCS alumni. to talk about the open positions. And I want to share a success story with you. So one of the colleges called Chase, and they were trying to hire an industrial maintenance technology faculty position. And through Chase's outreach to our alumni, we were able to actually hire a BCTC alum into that position. So he's been doing this for about a month and a half now, and I think we'll start to see, you know, some benefit from that. So a lot of work to do with hard to fill positions. They're called hard to fill for a reason. And we really need to continue to work on ways to partner with the communities and bring those employees in. What questions on hard to fill positions?
Did you have a comment or?
No.
Okay. I thought you had a comment.
I'm sorry, I thought.
I was turning to
We thought we had a
you.
big buildup, but okay.
Yeah.
I thought there was a question
Thank
there
you.
too.
I want to, it is such a, I know for the new members, they may not, but it's such a delight to hear the things that you're doing for those of us that have been on the board for a couple of years. And
Thank
I want
you.
to personally thank you. And Paul may want to say some comments about that.
Yeah, I think that particularly with the hard to fill positions, we're in much better shape today than we were, you know, 6 months ago for sure. And I appreciate the strategies that we're working through. And even though these seem like easy things, they weren't being done. So.
Yeah, much more to come. And any ideas that anybody has, please share. You know, there's it's a tough market out there. It's an employee market. There are more jobs than there are employees. But I believe KCTCS has a wonderful purpose, and we have to connect with those candidates and share that purpose. So the last thing I'll talk about, and this is very quick, is our culture DEI analysis. So this was started before I got here as well, and this is really an RFP that was put out that we will do at the system office, and we will be looking at how our culture impacts our DEI efforts or helps those DEI efforts. So you could have things that you may not know you're doing that could cause implicit bias. So for example, job descriptions. Many organizations, if you really don't need a college degree, are not requiring them because it helps open up the market to individuals that may not have had the benefit to go to college, but they have the experience. So hopefully this study will yield some of those results and help us to think about our systems and our processes that could prohibit us from having an inclusive workforce. So we have 2 vendors. They're coming in on September 30th. And they will be presenting. So hopefully at the next board meeting, they will have started the work or we'll have an update for you. So I want to thank everybody. I'm so excited about all the work, you know, listening again to all the questions that the Regents have. To me, I'd rather have Regents ask questions because to me that shows they care versus kind of the rubber stamp thing. So thank you so much. And I look forward to working with you all.
Thank you, Lynn. Yes, so I want to just say a few words here before I turn it over to Wendy for the ROC update, Resource Optimization Committee. Very excited about where we're at with the RFP. I would say that we're closer to the end than the beginning as far as this resource optimization RFP goes. And so just wanted to take a moment to loop in our new students and our new regents. This study was voted on unanimously back in June of 2022, just 3 months ago. RFP has been released. We've had presentations. And like I said, we're closer to the end of this process than we are the beginning, which is great. But, you know, I've gotten several notes and calls from outside KCTCS and inside KCTCS, and just wanted to make this statement public. I want to ensure everyone that neither the board nor I or my leadership team have any preconceived notions or an agenda. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing the study in the first place. We'd save the money. So in my experience with studies such as this, and in talking to colleagues across the country, we will end up with 3 large buckets of recommendations. The first are that you accept just 100%. That makes sense. The second one are ones that you look at it and you say, well, part of this makes sense for KCTCS, the other part doesn't. And the third one are things that you either shelf or just put it aside and say, this isn't going to work. I also feel we're being very proactive. As I talk to my colleagues across the country, the legislature has spawned many of these in Pennsylvania, Washington State, Louisiana, Texas, et cetera. And, you know, you typically don't want to be on that end of it either. And so it's going to be good to have rich data that we can act on, but also present to the legislature, to our constituents, business and industry. You know, there's three pieces of this that's going to be looked at. One is the structure of KCTCS and its colleges. Two is the physical plant. And three, come on, Paul. Programs of study, sorry about that. Programs of study is the third branch of this. And so, and again, I mentioned this when, and I did forget one thing for Regent Cox and Regent Girdler. I did this the wrong way, but you saw Beverly present. Beverly is our interim vice president of administrative services, and Lynn Hillis is our new vice president over, it's a long name, talent, inclusion, and workplace culture. So they've hit the ground running, but I apologize for not introducing them to you because we introduced them at lunch. So lastly, I'll say before I pass it off to Regent Fletcher is, and I mentioned this when Lynn was in there, I think we've found an efficiency. Again, as we were getting these presentations, it just made more and more sense to try and integrate the other RFP on compensation equity into this one. It saves money, it'll save time, and I think we'll end up in a good place. So I will stop and I will turn it over to you, Regent Fletcher.
Well, after all these great presentations today, I don't have a whole lot more to say, but I would like to thank the board for giving us the charge. And as he said, we've already found an efficiency in being able to roll the two RFPs together. That's going to not only be a cost savings, that's going to be a significant time savings for our faculty and our staff who are going to be involved with whoever wins the contract in gathering the data that they need to go forward with this project. So I'd also like to thank Dr. Linden and Dr. Reese, Dr. Figueroa, and Dr. Handy. The presidents have been very engaged in this whole process, and I have learned multiple things. I would say something, but I have learned multiple things in every meeting that we've had with them. Their input has been invaluable to this process. I also want to thank Regents Cox and Witten and Green for their engagement as well, and for helping us to make sure that as we moved forward with this RFP process, that everything we did went back to our strategic plan and the mission of the organization, and that going forward, we all have that focus on students and the outcomes that this will bring, not only for learner success, but for our faculty and our staff going forward. So I will be very brief. We have had 3 meetings since we all met as a board. 2 of those were directly related to the RFP. No new recommendations are coming out of the rock for you this meeting, so we won't have an action item this time. And we did that for a couple of reasons, but the primary reason was there's a lot going on right now. There's a lot of data flying around. There's a lot of information to be had and some misinformation to be dispelled. And we felt like it was more appropriate to not add to any of that at this point. As you know, you gave us 3 charges. One of those that has already been completed was the DEI officer at each college campus. So now you know that we have 100% of our campuses with a DEI officer who's dedicated to those initiatives. So we've already completed one of the charges. You've heard from Dr. Williams today about learner success in the credentials arena. And while we're still waiting for the outcomes of the learner success report, as far as online learning, that is coming in December. And we know that they are working very hard. I've heard from faculty and staff and talked with Dr. Williams a number of times about the online learning platform that has gone online, how that's being integrated into the day-to-day and the faculty and the staff success with utilizing that, and what that's meaning for students. So we will see some outcomes from Dr. Williams's office in December, so stay tuned. And then finally, the third charge was on space and facility optimization. And as you heard from Dr. Zarapata, that is part of this RFP, which is very near completion. So procurement is finalizing that contract. As Dr. Zarapata said, the committee was charged with this. It was a unanimous decision by this board to go forward with this. In June, you further gave your unanimous consent to move forward with this, so we are moving forward. We have met twice as a group to talk about that with information on the RFP in the first meeting and going through that to make sure that we all understood exactly what was in there and that every question that we had could be answered by those vendors. The second meeting that we had, which was very recently, we saw presentations from both of those vendors, and I will tell you, they blew us out of the water. They both have tremendous strengths and have even opened up more questions for us as far as opportunities as to how we can use that data. The value of this data, I think, is going to be tremendous. And as Dr. Zarapata said, we may not use every detail of that data, but I have no doubt that it is going to help us to shield from outside arrows, perhaps, and it's also going to help us to move and drive policy change, not only from the board standpoint, but I think the individual colleges are going to learn a lot and be able to help their students even more. So as we finalize that, that's coming up very shortly. Procurement has been given the go-ahead to do the contract with the chosen vendor. I wish we could tell you all about them. I'm excited for you to hear from them, to see the timeline and the process that they're going to follow. But that will be the next presentation once that contract is secured. And again, rolling together the compensation and compression data into that is going to be a phenomenal cost savings and time savings. So does any
I think we've done an excellent job as a committee, like you said, in doing what we were charged with. I did have a question about the timeline and when we'll have an opportunity to invite participation from the full board. I know we are an ad hoc committee, and so what does that timeline look like going forward?
I think that's going to depend on procurement and their ability to move that process forward and to get that contract secured. Legal may be able to speak to that process a little bit more. I know that, Becca is moving forward with the charge to complete that. Pam?
So we are permitted as a board to go into closed session when an RFP has not yet been awarded, and we will be doing so later in the board meeting tomorrow. So there will be an opportunity for some limited discussion at that point. But at this point in the RFP process, ultimately, it is an administrative process. And so it will be moving forward through our procure to pay area. And then once it is awarded and finalized, I think definitely the preferred vendor, the successful vendor, will want to have board feedback and determine, that is how a vendor like this does their business, by getting feedback from all constituencies. And so I think the board, as the governing entity, will definitely have a role to play.
Yeah, if I had to read the tea leaves, for example, if we get a contract signed within the next 2 or 3 weeks, there is one final step, and that's a trip to Frankfurt for me and the procurement team. I don't know that for sure. They don't pull all contracts, something of this scope. Probably, his buddy's shaking his head. Yeah. So it's not my first time in front of that committee. So, I kind of know what will get asked and what to expect there. But, the board will get probably more updates than what they want. There's several different ways to do it, but there's going to be the governance piece of this and the administrative piece of this, which I'll be responsible for, and that'll be the assemblage of teams around those 3 buckets, around programming, around physical plant, and around structure. So that'll be something that's not going to be done to the colleges or the system office. It's going to be done with them. So I look forward to it, and it's going to be really important for this to be extraordinarily transparent, not just with all the board, but our constituents, legislators, business, and everybody out there, our students too. Our students need to have a big voice in this. And, I know We've talked about all sorts of things today, but I just want everybody to know that everything that we're talking about today is in the spirit of making our students successful. So
One of the things I will add there, and then I'm going to call on Dr. Linden and also on Regent Witten to kind of give a little input as to their experience with the committee and with the vendor presentations, without mentioning any vendors, of course. But something that you just said there is very important. And that is that all of this is being done with students at the center of the project. Everything that we do, we are here for them, and everything that we do should be to improve their success, improve their experience with us. And that word of mouth that comes from a student having a very good experience is the best marketing we could ever ask for. The other thing is, I think the legislature may be looking to this RFP as something that can be extrapolated across the state in all higher ed, not just here. And we have a real opportunity to be out in front and to be the pioneers in exploration here. How can we, knowing that the HERF funds are gone and the COVID money is drying up, how can we go forward and continue success or improve success for our students with limited resources? And I think that this is going to give us a real opportunity to do that. So if I can have that permission, Regent Witten, any comments about the process?
It's been a very long and interesting process, I would say that for sure. One of the things I would highlight, as Dr. Fletcher did, we have an opportunity here to kind of realize our own strategic vision moving forward and say, you know, we're going to take the reins, we're going to push forward when other institutions perhaps may not be looking at that. That's something that I've really enjoyed being a part of, and knowing how that's going to affect students that are sitting in my classroom. It's not just a number. It's not numbers on a screen. I see those faces. And I know, Patsy, I know that you're the same way. And of course, the staff members here who work with students, the impact that it's going to have on them moving forward, I think we can't even begin to quantify that. So thank you.
And very quickly, the two vendors that we did entertain presentations from were both willing to do all of their update meetings in public. So they will report information back to the ROC through our committee structure, which will be open dialogue, those will be open meetings. So our faculty, our staff, and the board will be privy to any information coming in, updates coming in at each of the following ROC committee meetings as the process goes forward. So they were all about being very transparent, and we really appreciated that from both of those vendors that we talked to. There's Dr. Linden.
Thank you. You move this down a little bit. And I appreciate the opportunity to make a comment, because I was sort of back there shifting in my seat. It's like, I raised my hand. So yes, so I appreciate the opportunity. But I do want to speak to, you know, I know that some folks are a little nervous anytime there's change, anytime there's an RFP where we're looking at efficiencies, that does make you a little nervous, especially if you think that your college may be affected. And, you know, I'm going to be honest, I was a little nervous too. I thought, how will this affect my college? But I want to say that we've had robust discussion in our meetings. And I really thank Regent Fletcher for your chairing the committee and your leadership. It's been wonderful. I really feel like the colleges have been listened to. Like I said, we've had robust discussion. The presidents who are sitting as advisory members on the ROC committee, we speak freely and openly, and I want everyone to know that we do bring any concerns that you have to that committee, and we do discuss it. Regent Green, Regent Witten, the other members on the committee. We heard from some really strong vendors, and I was so impressed and began to feel more at ease when they made their presentations. And I heard about their experience and their experience with higher ed, and I heard about them talk about things, and they talked about things, not just data. They also talked about looking at the culture of the organization, and they talked about looking at management practices. And those were all key to all of us on the ROC committee, because we wanted to hear, because we know it's not just about the data. It's about the people. It's about the student. So I'm really excited. You've already heard about some other things that the ROC committee has done and efficiencies that we've already found. So I am now looking forward to this opportunity. I think it's going to be a good thing. I think it's going to show us a way that we can shape our own future as KCTCS and how we can respond better to our students and better meet our students' needs. So I'm looking forward to what we're going to find out when we launch into the process with the companies. And I think everyone will be impressed with them. I was impressed with them. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That's our report.
I'd just like to make one quick comment, and that is coming from the classroom. I can see that this could really breed other models to expand improvement in other areas, such as face-to-face learning as well. You know, all of us that know that work with students and with accreditation realize that you have to have a comparable experience between the online environment and the face-to-face environment when it comes to students. So I see this probably as a beginning of something that could, again, create some best practices that really could be multiplied across the institutions and other learning formats. So I appreciate the work. Wasn't on it, but sounds like a busy group. So appreciate that.
We're excited for it to be a springboard to all future success of KCTCS. And again, you know, I always say we want to honor the work that has been done in the past, but we are excited about some innovations that they may be able to offer, some bringing in some experiences from other projects. Just some of the examples that both of these groups gave us made light bulbs go off in our heads, you know, all over the room. You could just see it, everybody. And then it just excited us. And I can't wait to share that with you all and have them to share with you what they can bring to the table. So I'm really excited. I'm hoping that Becca gets that contract through really quickly. This procurement process is painful, but I think we're almost there. And I think y'all are going to be very pleased. So thank you all for the opportunity to serve. Happy to do it.
Anybody else have any questions? 8.5 minute recess. Take a break. Thank you.
All right, our bio break is up, so if we can sit down.
We're back in session. The next item is mine and the audit report. And the auditor will be here tomorrow to give that the internal and external audit report to us tomorrow. So with that is, the next item on the agenda is review of the strategic plan from 2016 to 2022. And Dr. Zarapata?
Yeah, before I start with this topic, I did want to let people know, a few people have asked me, as you head off by the restrooms, you'll see a kiosk that's over in that corner. We put it back there for privacy. That's a Family Scholar House kiosk. And so we've put it in there for the community. You know, again, we're trying to be good stewards and good neighbors here. And so the kiosks are ways for folks that are in need to very easily come in and dial up what they're looking for and get that information to the Family Scholar House, who actually then packages up and ships it out. So kudos to Hannah for kind of landing that project here. They're a lot of them going out all across the state. And so I just want to let you all know what that was. Alicia Crouch is going to be doing our strategic plan final report. You know, I'm not going to gloss this over or anything. You know, we hit 5 out of the 10 metrics. We had 2 partials and then 3 misses. COVID impacted some of them, as we'll talk about, but not all of them. Some of them before the pandemic, I think it was experiential learning was one that we struggled with. But anyway, Alicia Crouch, please continue here.
So before we get into the new strategic plan, I do want to go over the previous strategic plan. So for those of you who were around for a while and for it, we did have 5 goals under the old strategic plan. You'll see a lot of those same goals continue in our new strategic plan. But one of the things that we did is we had long sentence goals in that last strategic plan that are hard to remember. And so we said in this next time, we're going to keep it really simple. Increase learner success, increase employment success, increase organization success. So the goals in the last strategic plan were really around that increase learner and increase employment success. And you didn't see the increase organization success. But as Dr. Zarapata mentions often, you cannot increase learner success without first taking care of the organization success. So that was added to our new strategic plan. So we did have 10 metrics in the last strategic plan, 2 under each of those goals. So these are the first 3 goals. Graduation rate and affordability are ones that we did hit. The graduation rate, we saw big increases throughout the life of the strategic plan, and we saw increases every year in the strategic plan and graduation rate. Our target on affordability was to be twice as affordable as the 4-year public institutions in the state of Kentucky, and we were able to hit that for the last 5 years. So that's great. So then the next one, retention, the underrepresented minority retention. We did make progress on this metric, and we actually saw the retention of the URM students increase more than our total retention rate. So we saw the gap decrease in retention for URM students, but we didn't hit the final target on this one. Why? This is one that was heavily impacted by COVID. So we saw a big drop in retention rates of those students who started in that COVID impacted fall 2020 year. So we are continuing to track this metric, and we've already bounced back for the next year. So we won't have final numbers on that until our census date on November 1st. But we do anticipate that was a 1-year dip in that URM retention rate. So the next one on here is the URM graduation rate. As with the overall graduation rate, this is a really great success story for KCTCS over the life of that 2016 to 2022 strategic plan. We saw a tremendous growth there. And then the next, in goal number 3, experiential learning, Dr. Zarapata mentioned that this was a spot where we didn't make a whole lot of progress. So about 2/3 of our Associate of Applied Science and diploma graduates are getting experiential learning for credit that leads to graduation. So we pretty much stayed around that 64 to 67% throughout the life of the strategic plan and didn't see much forward movement on that. So as Jesse talked earlier, there's a lot of emphasis on work-based learning continuing. So this is one that we will continue to put emphasis on in the next strategic plan. And then the associate degree transfer. So this is another one. We made a slight amount of progress, but we did not hit our target on this one. this is a metric that will also continue forward under the CPE strategic agenda, but we want to be a whole lot more targeted about it. 6 years ago, when we started the last strategic plan, there was a real focus on getting Associate of Applied Science students out and into transfer rather than out into the workforce. So what we saw as that strategic plan went on is that the focus really was getting people to work as quickly as possible, and so that so those AAS students were encouraged to go more straight into the workforce and not as much to transfer immediately. So this is, as I mentioned, this is a metric that will continue, but be focused on those AA and AS graduates who really, the intent of the AA and AS is not a terminal degree. In order for those students to be successful, they really do need to transfer on to a 4-year. So we will be monitoring that. Next slide, please. There's another slide on the goals. I think they're 2 per page. Yeah. Thank you. So goal number 4, we did hit our target on the overall fall to fall retention. Again, we did take a dip, just like we saw in the URM, but we were able to come in above the target on this one still. Student engagement, that's our feedback on the community college survey of student engagement, that we look at 5 indicators to understand the engagement of our students. For the first time since I've been at KCTCS, we did hit all 5 of the targets on this metric. So that was great news. And then our last goal was on licensure certification pass rates. This was the employment goal. We had licensure certification pass rates and a workforce credit hour conversion. The workforce credit hour conversion was another one that was impacted by COVID. And also, when we were talking about workforce non-credit conversion, we were looking at the non-credit side of the workforce house. So workforce does things on both the for credit and the non-credit side. And sometimes there are swings over time in what's done on the credit side versus the non-credit. So we've seen a movement towards the credit side of the house on the workforce piece. So the last one is the licensure certification pass rate. So that's one where we actually saw a dip in our numbers. We do have the latest data on this one, but we don't have the national comparison rate just yet. It's 2 years behind because the collection system that we're comparing to did take a break during COVID year. So we are right now comparing our metric to the data nationally from 2 years ago. Despite that, we did see a little bit of a dip in the percent of students passing exams. Obviously, during COVID, there was some difficulty in taking exams as well that is factored in here too. Does anybody have any questions about our 10
I was
metrics?
just going to make the comment, our testing centers were closed for months during COVID. So that I'm sure had a big impact on this. Please.
Excuse me, I had one question as well, and that was on your previous slide. You don't have to go back, but on the experiential learning, I know in a previous meeting, we discussed the possibility that perhaps more of that was occurring. We just were not documenting it as well. Have we made any strides in that? I guess that would kind of pull up that metric to really reflect what hours of contact the students are really getting experientially.
Well, so that metric was limited solely to academic credit. So if a student did not receive academic credit, then it wasn't included in that metric. So we are working with Workforce Solutions to really more broadly capture that, but it is a work in progress.
The 720 hours of experiential contact learning or whatever at each college, we are like pulling over the amount of actual experiential learning. So everybody is reporting that we're maximizing those that are doing it, right?
On the for credit side.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions? So if not, I will move into the next strategic plan.
That sounds good to me. And I think Alicia and her team should be applauded for what they've done on the dashboard for this one too, that she's going to show you in a second. It's really good.
You mentioned the national database not being available yet because it's a little behind. How about on and I'll use nursing as an example because that's my field. How do we look compared to the rest of the state on the, like the nursing licensure pass rate?
So I haven't looked at that lately, so I need to go out and look. Obviously, that is publicly accessible data, so we'll get you that information. So in our, for the next strategic plan through 2022-26, I mentioned that we do have the 3 goals. So increase organization success, increase employment success, and increase learner success. And then below that, we have 6 performance metrics. And so what I really want to do today is focus most of this on showing you the dashboard. So you've heard Tableau. This is the 3rd time that you've heard Tableau today. So we're really moving towards Tableau and being able to have publicly accessible data. So this is the first time in my history at KCTCS that we have published strategic plan performance measure data publicly, so that not only can folks who don't have access to our internal data warehouse that work for KCTCS, but also the public can hold us accountable for the data. So I'm going to take the mouse from you if that's okay. Okay, can I do it backwards?
Perfect.
So I just want to give a lot of thanks to my staff for pulling this together, especially for Heather Summers. She really took the bulk of the work on this. So we have, so this is our strategic plan dashboard. It's accessible directly from the System Office KCTCS website through the fact book now. There are several tabs on here. So the first is an introduction to the dashboard, and it contains information about each of the metrics. So this is a system-wide time trend on how we're doing on each of the metrics. So you can see, for example, on the employee retention rate, for the few years right before COVID, we were about an 88-89% employee retention rate. We did see that really drop that first coming out of COVID. We're at 83.3% in the latest year there. The same with the other metrics. We see alternative revenue. We see the massive gift to West Kentucky in 21-22 there. But you will be able to go and see all of the metrics on here. We are still populating the 2-year persistence rate, so that is to come. But you can see academic year enrollment, for example, we had about 106 to 108,000 students prior to the pandemic, and you can see the impact that the pandemic has had on our enrollment. So we can click on any of these metrics and go straight to a tab on those. But the first thing I want to show you also is a targets tab. So the targets tab So the targets tab of this allows you to look at college-specific data. So here we can look at each college's data for 1 year at a time. So if you wanted to see that over time, you can get to older data on here as well. But this allows you to really see, where might there be gaps in things like employee retention, or who has a high employee retention rate right now. And the same thing on the revenue side. Again, we've got the West Kentucky year, kind of making this chart look imbalanced for this 1 year. We have the same for the targeted industry sector credentials, the post KCTCS outcomes metrics, as well as the academic year enrollment. And again, 2-year persistence will be following. And then so those are the overall pieces, and we can dive down into each of these metrics. So I'm going to choose the academic year enrollment metric. So I mentioned we have 3 goals in the KCTCS strategic plan, but I didn't mention that we also have an infused priority, which is to really focus on equity and inclusion. So in order to do that, we really want to call out data so that people can drill down into the data. So as so I've selected the academic year enrollment as an example here. What you'll see at the top is what goal is academic year enrollment under, what is the key performance indicator, and then we have that data available by college going across the top, so you can see a 1-year look at that. You can click on any of these and you can see this number, this change, so you can see what's happening with the college over time on any of these metrics. We will be adding the targets on here so that we can then focus on how the college is doing relative to the targets. And then down below, we have heat maps on each of the metrics. And so the heat map will allow us to, you can look at the KCTCS overall or drill down to a college, and then you can select what kind of information do you want to see. Right now, it's at the age groups and the gender across the bottom, but I can switch it. Let's look at race, ethnicity, for example, by gender and what's happening. So you can see here what the heat map indicates is the darker the color, the more students are enrolled. Based on the demographics of Kentucky, as you would expect, we have more white students. So you'll see the white students in dark in here, the darkest on here, and you'll also see gender. Like colleges and universities nationwide, there are more and more females going into higher education. So you'll see the darker bucket here being on the female side. But if you want to know what has been happening over time in any of these populations, then you can scroll over and look. So if we wanted to see, for example, what's happening with the total Black African American population over the last several years, then you can see that on this slide as well, or on this heat map as well. So that's a quick overview of the dashboard and where we're trying to get so that you have a lot more access to information. Any questions?
It is fabulous. And I geek out over this. I got on here the other night and looked through all of this. I absolutely love it. And I thank you. You know, that saved you 500 phone calls for me going, what about this metric? What about that metric? No, I really did like it. And I think it's great. And I really applaud you, especially being able to drill down to the college level data. I think that's just so helpful for anyone, you know, who's asking those questions. So kudos.
Alicia, sorry, this is an intro, right? This is just like an intro to it. So where do we click on there to find this stuff?
So if you go to system,
I'm on the website, like the index of.
Oh, yes, go to the index of dashboards, and then on the right, there should be a 22 to 2026 strategic plan.
Gotcha. Okay. And then, okay.
Yes.
Thank you. And this is why you did it, because of Wendy, right?
They've blocked my caller ID.
Hey, we geek out over data too. So anytime that we can drill into data, we're happy to do it. So, and we are happy to have an audience for that.
Again, thank you, Alicia. This is fantastic work. I think having it publicly available too is very important, very helpful. So thank you very much. Chair Stevens.
Before she leaves, wait, smart. And that is just, with this data, is there any way to link it to trend data like for the Commonwealth overall? For example, would an outsider know when they see this tremendous stretch in West Kentucky that this was due to or attributed to? Is there like a legend somewhere that explains things? If there's a severe outmigration, do we note that occurred thus they can kind of make a correlation with the trend? Or
so with the grant piece, we haven't provided any contextual information, so that's something that we can look at adding. We do have a help tab on the dashboard that we could potentially add some contextual information in there. We do also have a dashboard that has things like participation rates by race, ethnicity, so that you could compare, what our population is against that other dashboard, but we don't have it in the same place right now. But it's a good idea to add some of that contextual data to it.
Yeah, I have a quick question. So I see you get the data from somewhere. What exactly do you do with the data? How do you analyze it? How do you use it to improve that metric?
So we're doing a few things. So we're looking at, so we have an action plan that underlies our strategic plan. So we have some leading indicators that we are actively monitoring to make sure that we are making progress on these ultimate metrics. And we are doing both a qualitative and a quantitative look at those leading indicators to understand that information and provide the data to decision makers and people who are closer to the field and working with students.
So I guess secondary follow-up question. So for instance, the one metric we looked at as far as, African Americans and the downward trend, is there a specific initiative on not just that metric, but other metrics of downward trends in this data?
So there are quite a number of strategic initiatives on things like ensuring that we're getting the enrollment up. You know, Super Someday is one that comes to mind on the Black African American, the Hispanic Latinx population, for example, going into communities and actively recruiting in churches and different places where people are. So I can't speak right off the top of my head to any other initiatives
Well, I
right
know
now.
Marketing has an initiative that's specifically targeted to African Americans in urban areas. Dr. Williams may have some further information.
We do have a number of strategies in the action plan around specific partners to go out and enroll, for example, in the Latinx or Hispanic or African American communities. I do want to, though, give credit that Dr. Zarapata allocated $10,000 per college. The colleges will be applying for that to start a Black male retention strategy at each college, because it's not just getting the individuals, it's keeping the individuals. And then separately, we are a part of a larger student success collaborative with the Council on Post-Secondary Education. This is not unique to KCTCS. It's unfortunately sort of a trend as people are going to employment and seeing employment that pays them more money without having additional education right now. And so we're all struggling against those higher salaries in some ways, because people need to invest in their families as well as themselves. So we're happy. The action plan is on with the specific tactics is on our website. And we can certainly share that link back with everybody as we share the link for these Tableau sites. But each college also has its own, based on its own population. I mean, Hazard's African American population is very small compared to Hopkinsville's, for example. So each of the colleges also has its own plan. And then the Council on Post-Secondary Education requires a diversity plan from every public institution, the universities and KCTCS. And that plan is focused not just on African American diversity, but all diversity, equity, inclusion. How is the college moving its targets forward? How is it moving its diversity in its staff, for example? How is it doing it in student population? How are we increasing the retention rates? So Jefferson JCTC is really focused on diverse student graduation rates over the last few years and have made some huge jumps. BCTC has a number of different diverse initiatives that Dr. Capo could probably speak to that are specific to their population. So there's some global system-wide opportunities, but each college also really works with the diversity in its community and how to best serve that.
So just to be clear, that population is important to me, but I'm also looking at the larger perspective of how do we approach any trend that's downward? Do we add additional resources to it? What is our ability to sort of gather around these downward trends wherever the trends are? So
I would say that was an example of allocating some system level resources to some very specific initiatives. But yes, that's why we have the leading indicators. These indicators, you can look at this today and it's going to look the same tomorrow. This dashboard is not going to change except once a year. So spend all the time you want, but then don't look again until this time next year because it's not going to change. But we'll have these leading indicators that we will be able to monitor, and the presidents will get together and look at those and be able to think about how to allocate. And I know Dr. Zarapata also has a set of metrics that he's evaluating the presidents on, and so that's a piece of that as well.
Any other questions? Any other comment? Any other comments from any board members? Go ahead.
Are we expecting them to go up this year since this is 2022? Are we expecting them to go up this year? Improvements and
so with the 2023, yeah. So like academic year enrollment, for example, you saw and may have seen in the board report, we were up 2.7%. As of today, our enrollment for fall is up 4.9%. So we do think that, we'll see an increase in enrollment this year. I think things like the employment and transfer are probably going to lag a little bit further behind as we recover from COVID.
Any other questions? Hearing none, I want to remind everyone that your pictures headshots can be done as soon as this meeting is adjourned out there. The photographer's out there. The bus will pick us up for dinner at the Brown Barrel, and it's at 5 o'clock at the hotel. I entertain a motion to adjourn for today.
So moved.
Second. All those favors say aye. Thank you.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.